I'm not an advocate of parents preventing their children from utilizing mobile phones or mobile devices, because that would tantamount to what certain individuals did in the 80s, where they demonized the television set.
Right.
There were certain organizations,
Yes.
they call it the devil's box. With such preponderance of information being made available now, parents must set the agenda along those lines to curate, to fish out content channels and platforms that fundamentally inform and then educate before entertainment.
Bada, as is popularly known, welcome to Reframe with Jadisola.
Thank you very much. I feel very honored to be considered worthy of such a platform. And like you said, it's so necessary to learn how the world is learning into the future.
Yeah, and that's what I think, and that's really the reason why we're doing this. So before we delve in, I'll ask the first question: who is Bada?
Quite simply, a guy who's called to impact, particularly within the media and entertainment space, and specifically in Nigeria and Africa. And so to do that so meaningfully and intentionally, the impact that it can have for society is huge. That's what I'm about across TV, radio, whatever expression of media it is, to offline platforms like MEFA that you mentioned, even to my foray in advertising. It was about making the highest possible impact.
One of the things I know in the short term I've known you is you're very kind of Pan-African. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I want us to talk about influencers and influencing the next generation.
Even when I wasn't clear what was going on, I knew that there was something quite wrong. The way we consumed Western media and the influence that it had on us. Growing up, doing music, a lot of my peers wanted to rap because all the guys that they saw as the successful musicians at the time in the 90s were American. Even at that time, our media platforms like radio stations barely played Nigerian music.
Yeah.
They played mostly foreign music. It was much later that things started to change. So it was almost as though the West was best and the rest was bad. There was no pride in our own things. And so I remember when I started singing with two friends from secondary school, we founded a group called Nature. We got signed to a record deal. I was 16, both of them were 17.
Oh, wow.
And we were making Western music, really. It was Western, there was nothing African. We were trying to be more Roman Catholic than the Pope. Absolutely, we would wear baggy jeans, we would sag, we would, all those things we picked up from just consuming Western music videos, watching Western movies.
Yeah.
Content on the traditional media spaces we consumed were disproportionately skewed towards the Western cultural, influences. Some who had never even been on planes before were speaking with American accents.
Honestly, I have to tell you, that's the reason I don't listen to radio. I do not. If I listen to radio, I'll listen to Wazobia.
Absolutely.
Honestly.
Yeah. But it's even better now.
Yeah.
Back then it was worse. It seemed as though the requirement for being picked as an on-air personality, especially on radio, was to have a fake accent, which speaks to a lack of identity.
Yeah.
And in a way, lack of self-esteem. Because if you define and validate yourself by the standards of other people, and you think to yourself that what is yours is Raz, then there's a problem. But we were not educated or equipped enough to understand what the problem was. But
I'm just going to interject there. It wasn't always like that. If I link back to the 50s, 60s, pre and post independence, my parents' era, the type of music, High Life, Bobby Benson, Victor Waifo, Fela, all of that, we were very kind of nationalistic, and we were proud of our heritage. We were proud of our music. There was original content. When did that shift happen?
In the 80s, primarily in the 80s, Western Nigerian television was founded. The agenda setting around it was nationalistic. The agenda was to push Nigerianness. All of us watched NTA. I mean, I wasn't here. My parents watched NTA. Everybody watched NTA. Watched the same thing. The guys who were newscasters were iconic figure. He became superstars.
Yes, watch Kokra Dog.
Exactly.
We watched
This was by Moonlight for the kids.
Tears by Moonlight. Yeah. So when TV started at 4 o'clock, so all you.
Absolutely. So the agenda setting around media at the time was deliberately nationalistic.
Okay.
But as we evolve, the fact that a lot of our elites were schooling abroad and they were exposed to certain kinds of content and they thought, oh, this thing that is on TV back home is not good enough. And so the decision makers started to skew content more and more along Western lines. And if I remember, I grew up watching cartoons, children's content like Super Ted, Voltron, Tom and Jerry, all of those things, as when they were feeding us those content pieces, were at least 10, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Some of those
Right.
Sesame Street, they were filmed in the 70s, and we were watching them in the 90s.
Yeah.
And that was because they were literally being dumped down to third world countries because certain persons, in some places, had set the agenda to along the lines of cultural imperialism. I guess when the world shifted from fighting physical wars, the battlefield became the mine.
Yeah.
How do you sort of subjugate people without needing to shoot guns at them?
The more subtle.
Absolutely. So it became, content, push as much westernization.
Powerful. And then you start to disregard your own culture, or
Not even just disregard, you start to stigmatize and demonize, It's almost like, don't expose my kids to that. Everybody wanted children who were more Western, and local became synonymous with negativity. That somebody is local doesn't know culture. Yeah, like they say, oh, they called you a local man, you were likely to fight the person who called you that.
Yeah, exactly.
It just had negative connotations. But there's nothing negative about being a local person. Every place has locals across the world. That's where it shifted in the 80s. And then we started to reset it somewhere around the 2000s.
Yes.
And it started with our music.
Yeah.
It was all of a sudden now fashionable for even Nigerian elites or people who schooled abroad to listen to because the music was now getting international recognition as well. We're being given awards on international platforms and all that. And then even local media channels started to play a lot more music. And
so all be Two-Face and all of those people.
Yeah, so it shifted very significantly and it's continued to grow from there. Now our guys are playing arenas and stadia all across the world. There's no shame in listening to Burna Boy or Thames because they are now global artists in their rights. But it took a while to get there.
Definitely.
There was a lot of resistance against not just music, culture, because the West was best.
So with that in mind,
Yeah.
and with your experience in media, how do you think we can use media to shape how we guide our children around what they watch, what they stream, and what they engage with? Because social media is now on a different level.
Fantastic question. So with traditional media, we had what we call the gatekeepers, institutions who had the responsibility of helping to filter what was going out and being disseminated to the citizens of the country. Meaning, before you put something on air, it had to go through the checks of the regulators, right? If it contained information that could negatively impact people or negatively influence people, then it will be tagged not to broadcast. But we've since evolved from traditional media into digital and social media. Well, the gatekeepers no longer exist. With the democratization of media, everybody is now a creator. We now no longer need to pass what we're creating through
any regulatory.
So you now have just the preponderance of all manner of information, all manner of
misinformation,
at everybody's disposal. Just with a smartphone and a connection to the internet, you just have access to this, endless, limitless amount of content, most damaging, actually. So it then behoves on parents and individuals to appoint themselves gatekeepers.
Yes.
When you have children who are young, who are impressionable, who are easy to be influenced, and you give them access to such limitless information, there's every chance that they wouldn't utilize it optimally. Let's put it that way. Or they wouldn't optimize it constructively. I'm not an advocate of parents preventing their children from utilizing mobile phones or mobile devices, because that would be tantamount to what certain individuals did in the 80s, where they demonized the television set.
Right.
There were certain
remember
organizations, he's literally, prohibited
What you
TV.
yes, yeah,
Because
Upload TV.
they call it the devil's box, right? But we know that it wasn't no devil's box. Lives were being transformed by certain content positively
Yeah.
that sat on the so-called devil's box. So how on earth could it be the devil's box with such preponderance of information being made available now? Parents must set the agenda along those lines
Exactly.
to curate, to fish out content channels and platforms that fundamentally inform and then educate before entertainment. Children, teenagers, young adults spend 70 to 80%, maybe even more of their time watching entertainment content
Yeah.
that leave them with no real value at the end of the day. There's nothing wrong in laughing or enjoying oneself, watching a streaming platform or whatever. But on those platforms also sit God knows how many millions of hours of content that can educate, that literally can transform lives. Behoves on parents to say, okay, yeah, so your viewing time is going to split along these lines. What percentage is informing you? Yeah, letting you know what's going on in the world, what your peers are doing around the world.
Yeah.
What's shifting the direction of travel for individuals in politics.
So the feelings of the time.
Yeah, exactly. What we would call current affairs when we're growing up. Right?
Yeah.
Every kid needs to know, the world they live in. And then a lot more, I think, should consist of educational.
Education.
For sure. There are parents who just get overwhelmed by the negativity that abounds. You see half naked people all over the place and whatnot.
Oh.
You see all kinds of influencers who are bad influence
Themselves, honestly.
yeah. And there's the tendency to want to shut down and think, oh, nothing good can come from this.
Right.
You are mistaken.
Just cut it all.
Even TikTok, it would seem like all that happens there are dance challenges.
Exactly.
No. There are channels on TikTok that are teaching life skills, that are teaching technical skills, that can teach you what you may need to sit in a classroom to learn for 3 months in a matter of days.
If you curated
Already curated. And because those platforms are monetizable to the content creator, it now puts the responsibility on them to ensure that the content, if it's educational, that they are creating, makes sense. Because that's what will keep people coming back. That's how they make money.
Yeah.
So if you find such channels, you can then sort of aggregate them in a way where the child is able to access them and benefit from them. So the idea is not to make the young adults or children view social media or digital media as anything bad. It's fine to go and find actually what is beneficial and what is valuable to you, because there are tons and tons and tons of them there.
So it's really curating it for you to consume, as you said, and in this order, information to inform you, educate you, and entertain. And you have to balance that. And the responsibility is on us, the parent, to be able to do that. But then I ask you though, when we're talking about the role media plays in helping African youth with identity, with purpose, I'm a 14-year-old. At some point, there's some form of agency. How will I balance these three that prescribed as the way to grow?
Yeah.
Because we're seeing a lot of tension in families, and even in one of the episodes we just recorded, we talked about sense of identity and mindset of the children we're trying to raise here in Lagos. They haven't left, but they're living in Lagos, but their mindset is global.
Yeah.
And so, the parents are at ongoing tension because they're like, the cultural perspective, we're Nigerians, we're Yoruba, we're this. And this child is looking at you that, no, I identify as, so where is that balance?
You find the balance.
Yeah. And again, advice for parents or young people themselves in terms of the identity and culture that you're consuming that are conflicts with your society and culture.
There's something Burna Boy's mom, Bosel Gulu, said on the stage of the BT Awards, where Burna won the Best International Arts category at the BT Awards in 2017. He said, one thing all Black people should understand is that we were first African before we were anything else. I think that sets our identity, our quest for identity in perspective in terms of what we need to seek. I find myself, deliberately searching out people who are curating content around Yoruba history, for instance. How did we evolve as a people? And I would have needed to read hardcover books sitting in Kennedy Library, the University of Ibadan, to get to those information years ago. But now people are actually, curating content based on research, and you only have to just go look for them and you'll find them. I took a trip to Badagry a while back and I ran into an American guy who's adopted the name Ifatunde, which today is becoming more and more popular because of the social media sensation called Dr. Mar. If people who were displaced hundreds of years ago are finding their roots intentionally, what excuse do you have if you're here? What excuse do you have if you're here? African culture has gone mainstream now, so there's no shame anymore in being African. I remember when I was studying linguistics in the University of Ibadan, and there was this study around evolving language policies for country, and there were a lot of research around what the best methodology is. Learning to speak foreign languages first before your local language puts you in an advantageous position over people who did the opposite.
Yeah.
And it was found that people who spoke their mother tongue first actually displayed better mastery at their second language. It's scientific. It is scientific. So the Japanese, the Chinese, the Koreans grew up speaking their own language. They learn mathematics, technology, engineering, all in their tongue. Yeah, mother tongue first. I think there's a fear among a lot of parents that if a child starts to master Yoruba, they may not be able to speak English well or competently. So culturally, we have to embrace what is ours because that is what defines us as a people.
That was one thing I know that I entrenched in my children. They were born in Canada. While we were living there, I always told them, you're Nigerian first. Your name is Eitayo. One day, no matter how Canadian you sound, or you're going camping, or roasting marshmallow, one day somebody's going to say to you, where are you from? Where are you really from? You can sound more Canadian than they are. I said, so always remember that you are Nigerian first. So there's no confusion about your identity or sense of belonging because you will never be Canadian. I've seen it growing up in the UK as well. The impact it's had on identity.
Yeah.
You're not Nigerian enough, you're not British enough, kind of somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think that is what's really this new age, Africanism is doing through music, through culture, through media, which is why I think it's such a powerful tool in influencing. You're seeing people who are foreign born, who are coming back, Nigerian kids who have never lived in Nigeria, who have chosen in their adulthood to come back, live here, work here, and make a life for themselves. So I think really, the wave has changed. A lot of us would prefer to wear our national clothes, national Nigerian designers.
Yeah.
And I know recently one award they had that was our own Met Gala kind of thing. Even abroad, they were, curating all of the outfits and that these are by Nigerian designers. So I think that pride
It's being restored.
it's been restored and has been restored and continues to be across arts, culture, music. So if we talk about our music, which I think has been really the main gate
Driver. Yeah.
and driver, if we talk about it in terms of performance, live performance, and I know that is one thing that's so dear to my heart. And one of the reports I picked up, I wanted us to talk about that and how MEFA comes into this. And that report was talking about how live entertainment and live performance has really, died off, and how live entertainment and concerts is kind of restricted to 30 December 1. Talked about even the quality of our performers, that most of them, as I call it, just come on stage, mime, shout, can I get a yeah, yeah, jump up and down the place, and then, they're off the stage. The report also talked about even, infrastructure for live performances. It talked about even capacity building and talent of our musicians. Because, like you said, technology is doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't actually do well in live performances. So, I mean, the report talked about, the various challenges, concept promoters, talked about even that re-engagement, that live performance can actually be a way of, restoration really of that segment, but also sustainability for the performers themselves. So I wanted us to talk about that and then how MEFA, also comes into that in trying to restore things in that sector.